What's enough? What's enoughness? And to me, that's what I love to talk about with productivity. How are we defining that? What is enough? What does it mean to be productive? What does success mean to us? It's up to us to define that
Yeah.
and to stop letting others outside of our lives do that for us.
Welcome to the Worthy Mother podcast, where we discuss all things identity, self-compassion, and fulfillment within and beyond motherhood. I'm Emily Rose Hardy, a mindset and self-love coach for moms. I am a firm believer that to be able to take care of our children, we must take care of ourselves first. This is not a parenting podcast. No, this is a podcast where we will challenge the societal expectations of what it means to be a mom, demystify the perfect mom myth, and learn to love ourselves. You are worthy, mama. Let's do this.
Hello and welcome back to the Worthy Mother podcast. I am so excited for this episode today. We're going to be doing kind of a spring cleaning theme, but it's a little bit different than what you might be expecting. We're going to be talking about really making space in our lives for what matters. And in a world where it feels like everything is supposed to be important, this episode is really meant to help you really actually consider what actually is important to you and make space for that. So we have Lisa Zawrotny joining us today. She's a productivity strategist and accountability coach, and she addresses productivity quite a bit differently than you're probably used to. And I know for me, as somebody who feels a little bit jarred by conversations about productivity a lot of times, like I feel like a lot of times those conversations don't really work for me. I think you're going to find this conversation really refreshing. I'm really excited for it. I think there's a lot to learn here. So, Lisa, welcome to the podcast. Can you go ahead and just introduce yourself to us?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Emily. I'm delighted to be here and to talk about productivity differently because I think it's so important. So, hi, I'm Lisa Zawrotny. I'm a productivity strategist and accountability coach, founder of Positively Productive Systems and host of the Positively Living podcast. And I work especially with creatives and caregivers. Those are the ones who feel jarred by the productivity conversations, right? I help them reduce overwhelm and boost productivity without the burnout. That's the key, right? And without sacrificing what they love. We want to do what we love. That's the whole point of living. And so that's what I'm out to do. And when I'm not, having these conversations that I love, the other favorite things that I love to do are hanging out with my family. I have 2 kiddos, 2 teens right now, so I'm always happy to spend time with them when I can, either acting like a rock star. We have actually a family band, or watching movies with them. We're big nerds, so you can find us watching Star Wars and Lord of the Rings at any given time. And when I need to be away from them all because I love them, but I can't miss them if they don't go away, then it would be somewhere hiding out with a good book and iced coffee and very likely trapped under a cat.
Oh, I feel that. I know I had to shut my cat out of the door for this. She can't come in here because she would be all up in our business right now. So
exactly. And then, you'd want to pet her. I'd want to pet her. She'd want us to pet her.
I know.
It would be a whole thing. So.
Yeah, she'd steal the show and we can't have that.
Exactly. So yeah, I get it. I get the mom life. I get the caregiver life. And I just know that we can do things differently and still get what we want to get done, but live the life we're meant to live.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's such an important thing to understand, like, why do we have these conversations about productivity? And it's just that it's getting the things that we need to get done so that we can also live, we can enjoy this life that we're given. And it sounds like, your family sounds like a fun one to hang out with. There'd be a fly on the wall watching the family band. That sounds so awesome.
Right. Yeah. Make some popcorn. Get ready for it. We also love popcorn too. We're here for the snacks. And
Love it. Love it. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to embrace this kind of making space for what matters in your life ideology?
Yeah, it comes from necessity and it comes from burnout. And my story of burnout, although I've had multiples and I think we do experience that in our lives, the big story, the real turning point for me that made me the coach that I am today was caring for my mom who had Alzheimer's at the same time I was pregnant with both of my children. So at one point, I'm caring for my mom. I have an infant and a toddler. And oh my goodness, it is still to this day difficult to describe it, to honor it in the right way, because it gave me a lot, but it also took a lot from me. And it was life lessons galore. It was incredibly difficult. And I was in survival mode, and I learned what burnout was. And I was at a point after she passed and I no longer needed to care for her, that I had to make some choices. And we're so inclined to say, what do I need to do next? Right? Do. What do I need to? We have a problem and we want to find a solution that we add, right? It's always adding on.
Yeah.
And somehow there was a voice inside me that said, take a minute, take a breath, take a nap, go through everything you've neglected and kind of clear a path. And I literally did that. I went through my clutter. I went through boxes and bins and paperwork that I hadn't addressed. And I cleaned up and cleared out. And of course, you learn that that's an important way to process everything you've gone through. So I literally cleared a path, but it cleared more of a path than I realized. It cleared a path, what I call inside and out, because then it was like, okay, now I get to choose what I'm doing next. And I get to take care of me again. And man, we lose that so quickly as moms. There's such an expectation, right? And not just an expectation, we're honored to do it, but also we take it too far, too fast, because everyone else is like, yes, and you're supposed to, and there you go. And so I was able to step back and be like, wait, what do I need? And that whole experience of clearing a path and figuring out what little we needed, right? Of things, of activities, of, oh my goodness, even like, I guess it's almost like, in a great way, finding that I wanted to say bare minimum. And then immediately someone's like, ooh, that doesn't sound good. I'm like, no, wait, but it could. It could be good. And it really was. And when I discovered this, I thought, okay, I'm going to help others. And I became a professional organizer and actually started to physically declutter people's lives. Because you'll notice when you do that, go ahead and envision it. The one I'm talking about, that closet that you last dealt with, and how when you pulled everything out and you reorganized it, put less in, hopefully, you suddenly started breathing easier. You felt better. You felt more confident. You actually made a point to walk by that closet. Even though you didn't need to. You opened it up, you're like, hey. I mean, it was that kind of impact. And I thought, oh, this is amazing. So I started helping people as a residential professional organizer. But day one, I stepped into someone's home and I was like, oh, all of this is a manifestation of what's in their head and their heart. All of it. If I can get to this faster, we're all going to be better off. You're going to be able to still deal with the physical clutter, but it's going to be faster, simpler, and you're going to benefit from it in a way that is sustainable. And so I shifted into productivity coaching, and I bring the compassionate side of it because that's what I needed the most. When I was a caregiver, I needed compassion. I needed people to understand that I can't, quote, just do the things that they tell you, well, just keep a calendar or just do this. I want to get just and should and take them and toss them out of our vocabulary.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, toss it. So yeah, that is essentially my story with a lot of nuance, but it was leading me to understand that there is, in fact, a better way. And my MO is, once I figure it out, I want to share it.
I love that. And I do think, like, in this world we live in, there is so much going on. And then when you add caregiving to that, whether it's caring for, an adult family member who needs additional care, or children, as moms, we are caregivers. And it can be a lot. It can be a lot physically, it can be a lot mentally. There's a lot of stuff. Like, there's just a lot to it. And as you've said, like, our culture kind of tells us that, okay, well, if you just did it right, it would be easier, right? And I love the compassionate approach and knowing that it's not just about adding these tools, adding these systems that if you just did it right, then you could do it. It's like there's usually a lot going on behind the scenes in our brains of why something might be hard. And I know with clutter, that's a huge thing, right? That's something I very much deal with and always have struggled with clutter in my physical space. And it really is a manifestation of kind of clutter everywhere else in my being, right? And so hearing you say that is very validating,
Mm,
first and foremost. And then also it's like, okay, so there's another way to do this. It's not just, these self-help books we can read that we can't relate to, or, whatever it is. There's a more compassionate human way to make the space.
absolutely. And I also think too that it's not only, to your point, this idea of, well, if you were doing it right, but it's also to this idea of accepted suffering. And I see
Mm-hmm.
that so much with motherhood. It's like, well, you are supposed to be, frazzled and a hot mess and burnt out and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that we don't experience that. I did, I don't know, 24 hours ago, like, but there's something different in terms of the potential for us
Yeah.
that we need to believe in. That's the whole mindset aspect of it, right? That we're accepting, oh, well, then it's just hard. Well, maybe it doesn't have to be. Productivity is big that way. That's the hustle culture, right? You got to
Yeah.
work hard, right? And it's this lifestyle that says overworking and getting things done and using every possible minute of the day to do something, quote, productive is what equals value. And I think that for mothers, that's exacerbated even more because there's a sacrificial expectation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, so not only do we have to be humans that are productive, and I'm using air quotes like crazy, I'm gonna like get a cramp, but also now we have to be these productive humans, and then whatever else is left, we have to completely give until we're empty
Yeah.
to good mothers. And it's like, oh, whoa, 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 back the truck up. I know as a caregiver that I gave everything I had, and it didn't make me a better caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
This is not level of difficulty like the Olympics. We don't get awards at the end because it was harder. And a lot of times there are ways that we make it harder. And this is not victim blaming. This is us allowing something because it's conditioned in us,
Yes.
because it's what everyone else sees. So I'm saying, guess what? We can think differently. We can teach others differently. And then we don't have to do the most difficult level because it's not getting us any more points.
Absolutely. It's like we don't have to subscribe to the being harder is better. And like you said, it's not to say that it's not hard. I mean, I was telling you right before we hit
Yeah.
record, like we had a rough morning getting my kids to school this morning. It was hard. But it's the kind of, I think what happens is there's a devaluing almost of like just the quote normal hard and the normal like grinds that we're on as parents or as caregivers, right? It's like you are doing things and it is taking up energy. And like we put a lot of work and energy into caring for our children and into mothering and into showing up, whether we're doing it, perfectly or not, because usually we're not doing it perfectly because that's just not how it works. But when we kind of devalue that as a culture, and it's like, well, you need to be more productive. You need to be doing all the other things too to be good enough. And it's like, well, if I show up and I take care of my kids and they're healthy and cared for, and that can be enough. It can be enough just to say, I don't have to go above and beyond every day to be this worthy mother, right? And I think we have to actually stop and think about those expectations that are just kind of normal. Like it's just normalized that we have to be productive. We have to be go, go, go all the time. And that might not actually be what we want.
And the thing is that we conflate productive and busy,
Yeah.
right? So much. It's like the go, go, go is okay. And what do you say when it's like, hey, how you doing? I'm busy. Whoa. If that's your answer, let's pause for a moment,
Yeah.
shall we? Let's think about that. Yeah, it's like, okay, you're going, but what's that getting you?
Yeah.
And we moms are kind of in that like gravitational pull, but we can step back from it. And again, like you said, we are honoring the hard and there's difficult things and there are also things we want to do. So that gets to the
Mm-hmm.
value part of the equation. What do we value? And you even said a society doesn't necessarily value what we do. We need to be the ones to value what we do and say, look, I have children here, and sometimes surviving is the thing we celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It depends on the day. It depends on the situation. I have teens right now, and sometimes getting through the day is we're throwing a parade and making the popcorn. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like
Totally.
you have to, and valuing who you are and what you're doing, and that you kept them going today, and that you made things happen, and it's like That is the worthy mom, right? The worthy mother. That's what you're talking about here. And you used a word in there that I think is so important to connect to that worthiness. It's enough.
Mhm.
What's enough? What's enoughness? And to me, that's what I love to talk about with productivity. How are we defining that? What is enough? What does it mean to be productive? What does success mean to us? It's up to us to define that
Yeah.
and to stop letting others outside of our lives do that for us because, again, they don't have the proper compassion to understand. Success for me some days is getting out of bed, rolling them down to school, and getting to my desk. Woo!
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many factors, what you value again as an individual, and then also what the situation is and what the season of life is like and what else you're dealing with. And it's like there's no one right answer. I
That's
would
right.
love to kind of get into a little bit, kind of talking about compassionate productivity in a more concrete way. Like, what does that look like when you're working with a client to help them bring that compassion to the productivity and make improvements in those areas of their life to be able to, do the things that they want to do? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, let's set the scene for a moment here with this idea of compassionate productivity. I'm not saying that I necessarily came up with the phrase. It's not used
Hmm.
a lot, but I want it to become a thing. It's used in terms of leadership, which I was heartened to see, in this idea of the person first. So
Hmm.
compassionate productivity is taking the idea of being productive, which I define as, being efficient to live more, not to
Hmm.
do more, right? To get into that busy trap. It puts the person first and it takes the whole person into consideration when, just like we talked about a moment ago, defining success, defining productivity, when it comes to creating habits, planning, scheduling. It's like you said, one size does not fit all, right? And I think the compassion part came from the fact that that's what I needed the most as a caregiver. I needed someone to understand my situation was different. Stop giving me this system, this checklist, this you need to do it that way, the needs, the shoulds, the justs. I don't want to pick on anyone, but I will tell you as one example, when I was searching for the whole be more productive, keep the family together, I came across someone called the Fly Lady. And she's pretty cool and she's got some great tips and techniques, but I was utterly overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed by this whole process and everything that she was suggesting to do. And I was like, what's the first thing I think? What's the first thing that happens with my clients? What's wrong with me is the question
Hmm.
I ask. So my answer to you, if you're asking that question, is absolutely nothing. It's the system that's wrong, not you. So compassion has so much benefit for us, right? It can reduce our stress and help us connect better. It creates psychological safety and trust, which, keep in mind, we not only need for our relationships that are outward, from us, but we need it for our own relationship inside, right? So it's the basis for healing while achieving. To me, that's what compassionate productivity is. So like when you hurt yourself, you break a leg or whatever, and the joke is like, walk it off. No, you're not going to do that. You're
Yeah.
going to get, boot. You're going to get PT. You're going to do things like that. And to me, that's what it looks like with my clients is that they're hurting. They've been through trauma and grief. They're dealing with parenthood that, changes on a dime. Recently, I went from having a fairly normal day with teens to having a mental health crisis with one of them. These are big things that we are dealing with. And to be like, well, you didn't, get all your habits checked off your habit tracker today, and you didn't get the kitchen cleaned up. And why do we push ourselves so hard? We need that compassion to ease off and allow the ebb and flow. You mentioned seasonal, the seasons of our lives. I've done an episode about that, actually, multiple ones. And it can change because of life events. It can also change just in terms of how we function
Hmm.
after we become mothers, especially if we have gone through hormonal changes. Our energy levels differ. It's so again, the compassionate productivity is defining it ourselves and doing it in a way that can combine healing and achievement. That's really the best nutshell I can offer. And that's my approach. And that's how it looks with clients. We talk about what matters to them. So it's like, what do you value? Okay, you want to be with your kids, but you also need time for you. What's that going to look like? You don't like systems that tell you exactly what to do. You like freedom and flexibility. Great. We're going to use flex blocking for you as opposed to strict time blocking. We go through personality, preferences, values, and then create a customized way to still get what you got to get done and then be able to live how you want to live.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts coming forward. It's like just there's so much room, I think, for comparison when we're talking about these kinds of things. And
Mm-hmm.
like somebody being able to, you said something about getting all the habits checked off. And, it's like somebody may have more space in their life to do that. And I think we tend to compare ourselves to others, especially, seeing people highlighting that on social
Mm-hmm.
media or whatever it is. And there's the kind of two factors to it. There's the fact that there may be things in our lives taking up more energy. So when you're dealing with health issues, mental health issues, financial issues, like dealing with these big things that need to be dealt with and take a lot of our energy and our thinking and all of these things, right? You may
Mm-hmm.
not have the capacity to do these other, quote, productive things because you only have so much energy, so much time, right? And then there's the other side of it that we also have changing energy, right?
Yeah.
Our energy flexes, whether that's okay, we're getting the kid to sleep in their own bed. And like, I had that over the summer. I was hardly getting any sleep just because of what was going on in these couple weeks of trying to get the kid to sleep in a different way. And
Mm-hmm.
it was rough. And so I had to be compassionate with myself and know like I can't expect myself to show up the exact same way I show up when I have 8 hours of sleep. And there's so many factors to that. If you're sick, if you are, dealing with hormones, but our energy is not the same every day. Like that's really important to acknowledge. And yes, it
Even
kind of seems obvious, but
Yeah,
do we
even
really like think about it?
if we're only dealing with ourselves, let's say,
Yeah.
we're solo entity in this world, we're still going to have varying degrees of energy.
Yeah.
And the weather, the actual seasons of
Yes.
life, of nature affect us. So many things affect us. Yeah. And oh my God, the sleep deprivation. I didn't even talk about that as a caregiver, as a
Yeah.
parent. I was like multiple times over sleep deprivation. I was not myself.
Totally. Totally. And then to expect ourselves, yeah, to show up in the highest version of ourselves, like everything's going swimmingly in all areas of our lives. It's like we have to really think about our expectations of ourselves
Oh,
for what we
expectations.
value and
Yeah.
for like literally how we are actually capable of showing up. And maybe the checklist looks different when you're not at your highest energy, right? It needs to.
Yeah, that's actually something that I do with clients is we look at different days and weeks, and sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it has to be like, per emergency. It's like, how much room can we create in your schedule to begin with, right? Like how little can you do to still get what needs to get done so that you have that space, that elbow room, the buffer, right,
Yeah.
to deal with such things. And then what happens when even that's too much? You need a different intentional routine, which is reminiscent to me of when you have a power outage and you use a generator. And you don't light up the whole house with a generator. You do what's essential, your heat and maybe a little bit of light and, enough to be functional. And you're okay with that. And you're not like, well, this is, I mean, yes, it sucks when the power goes out, but you're grateful for the generator so that you can do what you need to do. And we need to kind of see it that way for ourselves. Compassionate productivity can look like asking yourself what your limits are day to
Hmm.
day. And here's the key. You ask yourself, and when you answer, you need to be okay with that. That's the key. It's not only asking the question and giving yourself the answer,
Yeah.
it's acceptance of it. It's loving what you perceive as your unproductive self and appreciating and celebrating what you have achieved, what you have done, even if it doesn't meet, expectations that either you have or that you've been conditioned to have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, compassion is the perfect word for it. It's like
Mm.
asking yourself the question and then having compassion for whatever the answer is and like honoring that.
Right. And if you were talking to a friend, you're talking to your bestie, and they're like, oh, I just don't have the energy today, you'd be like, then take a break. Do just
Yeah.
what you need to. You have to go to that one appointment, but cancel the other one and take a break and take a nap, and it's going to be okay. Why is it so difficult for us to do that for ourselves? But that's definitely what I'm out to encourage.
Ugh, I love it. Do you have any like specific tips just for anyone listening to this who's like, hey, how can I be more compassionate in my productivity and make some changes? I know that it's like a big thing to really kind of, if you want to be changing your life to function with systems and things like that that are more compassionate. But what are some small things we can do just today?
So I think that first thing that's coming to my mind, if you're starting fresh with this, is one, saying, where haven't I been compassionate? Where
Mm-hmm.
am I giving myself a hard time or pushing the expectations? Like here's a chance to be curious and kind of explore. Have I been giving myself a hard time? Am I trying to work with a system that feels really demanding? And the
Yeah.
first step is to give yourself permission to be like, whoa, wait, oh, Lisa and Emily just had that conversation. And you know what? I just found something that really doesn't work for me, but I was pushing it on principle. So I would say,
Mm-hmm.
one, be curious about that,
Yeah.
find those spots, because that is a case of, and this gets into my next favorite topic, which is decluttering,
Yes.
right? And the idea that clutter is what gets in the way of living the life that we want to live. So if it is not just the stuff, this is a quote from Peter Walsh, by the way, it's not mine, but I love it. Not just the stuff on the floor, but anything that gets in between you and the life you want to be living. So
Mm-hmm.
if we look at clutter that way, we start to explore that it's not only, what's on the couch and in the hallway and stuff. And it's not only even what's on our schedule and, in our calendar where we're like, that is a lot of appointments, but also too the ideas that are coming
Yeah.
in and the supposed tos and the obligations and this is how it's got to look, and the demands and all the things, information coming in, stories we tell ourselves, all of that can potentially be clutter if it's blocking us from breathing easier, from living better, from being compassionate to ourselves. So I think, yeah, step one is find those things that are getting in the way. Step two is decluttering them, allowing them to go and saying, that's not serving me right now. So I have to be okay with it. I have to be okay with quitting that new calendar system that I was determined was going to change my life in every way. It's okay. I'm telling you
Yeah.
right now, it's okay. You have a productivity strategist approved choice to get rid of it. Don't do it. Just, keep it to the basics, just like the generator with the power outage, right?
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And you all heard that. She said it's okay. It's okay not to have the most complex productivity systems.
It's better not to,
Yeah.
actually, because the more complex, the complexity, that is a great example of
Yeah.
something that is clutter for
It's
our lives.
cluttering. Yes.
Why do we not value simplicity? Because somehow we have been taught to value complexity instead.
Hmm.
Harder, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, if it's hard, if it's difficult, I mean, and you hear these platitudes all the time. We have been conditioned, just like diet culture sneaks in, right?
Hmm.
So too does the hustle culture kind of conversation where it's like, I was raised to work hard and, an honest day's work and that, if it's not difficult, it's not worth it. And just all of these phrases that suggest to us that if we do something that feels, dare I say, easy, oh, it couldn't possibly be valuable. It couldn't possibly be worth it. Oh,
Yeah.
but it is, because when it makes you feel better and be more energized and feel relief and show up better and be a happier person and a happier mama. Oh, that is so worth it.
Yeah, it opens the space to be able to live whatever that means to you, right? Like whatever
Yep.
that means, it's not just like, okay, I have time to lounge around. Although, yes, you have time to lounge around if that's what you want to be doing. But then it's like if there's like passion projects, if there's things that you want to be doing with your time and space, it's like do whatever it is that you want to be doing, but know that you have a choice to like make the space and you can choose the easy route to that. I mean, it sounds so obvious, right? Like, it's like, oh yeah,
It sounds like a
easy,
cheat
like,
code, but
cool. It does,
I,
but
I'm I'm there,
it's
man.
hard to,
Let's
it's
do
hard
it.
to like wrap your mind around it when we are so conditioned. Like, it's real that we feel like complex, hard, it's like that's what's valuable. Because like the statements you've said, those are pounded into our brains.
Yeah.
You have to work hard. You have to work hard. And it's like, okay, let's really break that down. What does that mean? In what context?
Right.
Right? Yeah.
And what does that do to you? And here's what's wonderful is as we open this up, as you open yourself up to this possibility, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I like what Lisa's saying here. Yes, yes, please, please, and thank you. Now you start to get into these areas, and I love it. Love discovering this. It's like, okay, not only are we making space for you to do something you love, guess what? You doing something you love actually makes you more productive.
Mm-mm.
What? So it's like, it's the, it's a positive feedback
Yeah.
loop instead of a vicious cycle.
Yes. It's energy giving.
It is 100% energy giving. Energy management is what matters way more than time management. We talk all the time about time. Well, okay, yeah, we have time. It's limited. We got to work with it. How do you best work with it? By being the best you within that time constraint. How do you do that? By the things that are energy giving, by the things that feed what you value, core values, things like that. I mean, positive psychology, which is the basis for how I coach productivity. And it was something I reverse engineered. Eventually, I was like, what am I doing here? And I got a positive psychology certification. I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. It's an understanding that when we make the choices of things that feed our purpose and challenge us and make us happy, that, it's not only like life-giving and fulfilling to us, but we show up better. And I was like, there you go. That's the productivity I'm looking for.
I love it. I mean, I have so many light bulbs going off. So I hope that anyone listening is feeling similarly. And there's something in here that you're like, okay, maybe I can think about something a little bit differently. You mentioned whole life decluttering a couple times and talking about just like making that space, whether it's the physical space or like what's going on in your brain and even those ideologies and the things that we've taken in and just keep as stuff stored up in our brain that get in the way of us living life the way we want it. Really, that's what it comes down to. Can you explain to us what this process of whole life decluttering can look like? I know, again, it's probably quite big, but where do we start? What does that look like?
Absolutely. And I actually came up with a framework, and I have a podcast episode about it, and I have resources on it. It's a simple framework. And it was interesting because I came up with this framework for physical decluttering so that someone could create their own process. Again, you have to ask the questions. You need to understand what the space in your life is meant to be for. So what's really cool is you can think about something that you may have done before and have experience with, which is physical decluttering, but you can apply it to other areas of your life. That's what you want to think of. For example, you look at a closet, it's in the hallway, and you're like, I want to use this for things that are heading out the door, for coats when people come to visit, for backpacks and supplies, what you choose, right? What the space needs to be for. And that's going to be dependent upon your life, how you're living, the space, like if you're in a studio apartment versus a large farmhouse, in the country, it's going to look differently for everyone. What you value the most, whether, you are parenting or right now, you could be an empty nester or child free, whatever the case, you understand like how you need a space to function. And you get to choose. So once you do, then that identifying is like the most important thing. And it's something that I think we skip right so readily. We're like, oh, let's open up some cupboards, take stuff out, clean it all up. We didn't stop to think what really belongs. And that's the key. That's this idea of making space for what matters, what really belongs in my life. So now take that idea. We talked about a closet, but now take the idea of a space like your calendar, right? What really belongs? We often say, I'll tell you what you value if you show me your calendar and your checkbook or your online bank for now, right?
Yeah.
What are you paying for? What are you spending time doing? And if you look at that and you're like, ooh, but that's not, then you realize that you have a misalignment, and that may explain why you're not as satisfied. That's a place to explore. So look at your calendar, look at your to-do list. Oh my goodness, I declutter so many to-do lists every session with a client, because what happens? people add stuff on for you. Oh, thanks so much. I love being voluntold. Yeah. Or, or demands happen. Kids will ask for things we want to, right?
Mhm.
As mothers, oh my goodness, we want to give. Best advice I ever got from a fellow mom was to say to not put their wants above your needs.
Love that.
Then I was like, phew, brain exploded. Yeah, exactly. So we have this tendency to just keep adding stuff to the to-do list. It's like an
Yeah.
extension charm from Harry Potter, and it just keeps growing. And so we have to take a good long look at that and say what really belongs. And what's cool about decluttering is it's not getting rid of stuff. Let's get that out of our vocabulary. It's making space for what matters, and you can do that in a variety of ways. For example, on your to-do list, you can say, that's a not now, right? That's
Yeah.
a delay. That's coming down the pike. Let's not have it there in our way where we have to push it to the side to get to the other stuff, where we're constantly reminded it's coming up, or we're distracted, where it affects our focus. Let's set that to the side, put it in a calendar event 6 months from now to remind us, boop, hey, think about this thing. We got to work on it now. Beautiful. That's called a delay. You're not getting rid of it. You're moving it out of the way. It's like if you celebrate Christmas and you have Christmas decorations, you are not keeping them in your living room by, the gaming system. You keep them out of the way and you bring them in seasonally. You can do that same thing with tasks on your to-do list, right? And so it's that idea of decluttering is making space. And there will be things, if you think about how you want to live, what you value, and what you have the capacity for, you will look at some things and it's a real long, hard look and say, yeah, that just doesn't belong. That's got to go.
Yeah.
And that is deleting. That is getting rid of it. That is letting it go. That is letting someone else have it. Well, that's delegating on your task list, but you get the idea. You see
Yeah.
how there's a wonderful parallel here. And then when we talk about our thoughts, our stories, right? The inner voice, the inner critic, we can start to have that conversation where we're like, "But you keep telling me I'm not good enough, and I'm unhappy. And I don't want to agree with you anymore. And I know you were probably coming from a good place, but I need to, it's you, it's not me. And we're breaking up, like
Yeah.
that's a
Declutter
form
that.
of decluttering, right?
Yeah.
Decluttering. It's like, or I don't have the energy for that, or that, oh my God, I always get are they mad at me? What's going on here? And like, whoa, I'm not taking on that energy. I don't have the capacity. That is wasted energy. I got enough to do. So that's how whole life decluttering can look. It's wherever there's something blocking you in your space from how you want to live, how you want to show up. Think about it like decluttering that closet and making the space for what you do want to pack in there.
I love it. And it's so, I don't know, there's so much opportunity for more energy and more alignment and more feeling fulfilled in life because you're doing the things that you want to be doing in that moment or that you need to be doing in that moment for you, whatever it is, right? And
Yeah.
when we can kind of cut the crap,
Yeah.
get rid of all the excess and the things that we just think are important because we never stopped to question whether that was something we actually thought was important.
Mic drop. Yes, that's so well said.
Really, really powerful. Just everything you've shared with us. Really a lot to take from this conversation and a lot that I will be taking from this conversation in my own life, thinking about where are areas that I can declutter because I know that there are a lot. I'm one of those people who holds on to a lot mentally, physically, it's just kind of my nature. And so I love all of these ways of approaching that. I think that really is helpful to have kind of a framework to step into that.
I love it. I'm encouraged for you. That's my whole point here is to be
Yes.
encouraging and to try those little steps of discovery. When you know that there's a possibility for something different,
Yeah.
now you will be looking for those opportunities. And I'm excited to hear what happens.
Yes. So, Lisa, something that I really love to ask guests at the end of the episodes, because I am like a huge believer in normalizing self-care, especially for moms, there is a lot vying for our attention and
Mhm.
things like that. So how can we all normalize self-care, make it just something that's normal in our lives? So I love to ask guests, how do you take care of yourself? And do you have any tips for moms just to make sure that they are also taking care of themselves regularly?
Yeah, I love this question because I think that self-care has been misunderstood for a long time. I actually have multiple episodes on my podcast about it as well. I'm so glad we're both having this conversation, that we're all having this conversation, because it is not only about like pampering, right?
Yeah.
It's often seen that way, and it's not that it can't be. I love a good pedicure, but it's also about us as humans needing healing, needing
Mm-hmm.
compassion. We talked about that, right? Needing things, right? We need our mind, bodies, and souls to be nourished and cared for. So I do try so hard to walk my own talk and pay attention to my energy levels, nap when I'm just not functioning. That's a real sign, right? Not functioning well. If I'm hangry, my whole family knows not to let me get there. But in all seriousness, I have theme days for starters, and I love doing that. That's a wonderful, simple, kind of fun way to like naturally batch things together.
Yeah.
So Tuesdays are my self-care day. And that is also from a practical standpoint. And so here's a great tip. When I know that Tuesday is my self-care day, I have nearly all of my appointments, like doctor's appointments and things where I'm being treated and cared for, not just the pedicures and things, but all of that on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Now, it's not always going to be that case. Sometimes they're not available, but the majority will be. So then it makes things easier, because when I'm at the dentist office and they're 6 months from now, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow. That makes it easy for me to be like, let's look at a Tuesday. So it keeps things kind of corralled for me. And it gives me this like dedicated day where I'm like, ooh, it's almost like this built-in permission to be like, it's my self-care day. So also, in addition to going to that appointment, I'm going to sit in the car with the music on with that iced coffee, or I'm going to do
Yeah.
this. Now, in a practical world, I want to be very clear and fully transparent that I will have clients Tuesday evening if they need it. It's not always, or I'll do an event, like I have some clients maybe are only every 2 weeks or every month, so it varies. So a Tuesday evening may be the case. So I give myself the day. So that's how you build it in, but also it stays practical. I take moments in the day too, because a lot of times we think self-care has to take so long. If 5 minutes can make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
of maybe doing a quick meditation, or sort of like the on-demand kind of self-care. And it can be 10 minutes of like watching a favorite movie. Hallmark fan here. It's the dopamine hits. I just need the simplicity. Life is uncomplicated, except if they just talk to each other. Communication is an issue, but still. But just watching that again. I'm going to mention iced coffee. How many times was that?
I mean,
But
I love good iced
seriously,
coffee.
so to this point, okay, to this point, and I mentioned music already. Here's the other tip
Yeah.
for you. You need to know, what does it for you? What's the thing that's like when you do it, you're like, oh, I feel so much better. Could be exercise. I run when I'm chased, but still, but movement can be important. Sometimes nature, but for some of us, we're like, dear God, no, I don't want to go out into nature. You find what you love. I actually have a workbook that I use with my clients, and it's free to request on my website. It's called the Joy List. And it's this idea that with a few questions, you can prompt yourself to understand what are those things that you just absolutely love. And they can be free, cheap, quick. It might be that you love having fresh flowers around you. And maybe once a week you can buy, an inexpensive bouquet in the grocery store, or, little things like that
Yeah.
that we don't think to do for ourselves can bring us so much joy and are, like you said, energy giving. That's how I live. And it can vary from day to day. There's some consistent things that I do, like I said, with the Tuesday self-care day. But then in between, it's like, how am I feeling? Oh, I do need a pick me up, or I do need a nap. A nap is a
Mm-hmm.
really great one. So those are what I do, and also the tips that I have for you.
I love it. And there's something about the way you speak about just the different components that are included in your normal self-care that is like, wow, that's really productive, right? Like having
Yeah.
Tuesday as a self-care day, it's like, so when you are engaging in self-care on Tuesday, when you're going to the dentist, when you are taking the extra time for you because you've blocked it off and you have it, it's like that was how you decided, like you intentionally made the decision to spend your day like that. So when you're
Yeah.
doing it, well, that's productive, right? Like you were doing the thing that you said you were going to do. And so I think there's so much value in that. And in making it so that it's important. It's just as important as the other things that get done during the week, right? And a lot of times that's not how we see self-care. A lot of times it just kind of happens because we're forcing it in different places, or it doesn't happen, right? Like that's, I think, the story for so many mothers. So I really love that, and how it just kind of ties back to everything we've talked about.
Yeah, it becomes prioritization and boundaries, which we need. It comes back to us saying, what do we want? What do we need? And then defending that. That's what boundaries are. Boundaries are like, this is how you can best love me, or I can best love me. And this is what I need. And yeah, it might take a while when your family isn't used to that. But when you communicate that with them directly and say, this is what I need to be my best, they love you, then they'll find a way, they'll figure it out, they'll get used to it, and you'll be so much better off because of it.
Yes, snaps for that, because just completely agree. Lisa, where can listeners find you? I know you mentioned that workbook that you have on your website. Is there anything else we can keep an eye out for?
So on the website, you can find all the directions for me, including the podcast and stuff, positivelyproductive.com. Yes, there's the workbooks that you can request. There's a core values workbook in there as well. And then I also have a new freebie that I'm really excited about and has become very popular. We talk about decluttering, and you talked about mental clutter and all the stuff that you have in your brain. And when you want to sit down and focus that's getting in your way, I do a guided audio that walks you through like a mind sweep, basically. And it's 5 minutes, and then it references other podcast episodes if, that's something you want to continue with. But if not, it's 5 minutes of audio to help you clear the clutter out of the mind, put it in a safe spot, then figure out how to process it after. So those are the things that you might want to check out. And of course, you're listening to an amazing podcast here, so you could pop on over to Positively Living, and I'd be honored if you did. And there are a number of episodes that go in even deeper to what we talked about today and complement this conversation beautifully.
Amazing. Well, we will get all of that linked in the show notes, make it really nice and easy for anyone listening who wants to check any of that out. Lisa, thank you so much for being here. This has just been a really an energy giving conversation. I just feel so excited to get to share this with other moms out there who may be needing some good spring cleaning right now.
And doing that lifts my heart. So it's energy giving for me as well. And truly my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me, Emily.
Thank you for being here. And thank you to all of you tuning in. So glad that you get to share in this with me. You are worthy, Mama.